June 29th, 2025. Just about the end of June already. It's gone so fast. Thanks for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. Today I'm talking about the Russian-Ukraine war that's still going on because it seems to have gone to the back shelf, so to speak, after the Israel-Iran war started up. But I just want to share a few stories with you here. I'm going to start with this story from June 11th. Secret British plans to defeat entire Russian Black Fleet revealed in leaks, says Grey Zone. This was leaked files reviewed by the Grey Zone exposed the covert war waged by British intelligence against Russia in the Black Sea, outlining Ukrainian honey trap plots along with blueprints for blowing up the Kerch Bridge. Sensitive documents reviewed by the Grey Zone indicate that the United Kingdom is the central architect behind Ukrainian military operations targeting Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Yes, we kind of figured that out a while back. That because if you think of the bombing of the Kerch Bridge and even the setup of the bombing of the planes that can carry nuclear weapons back on June 1st, it's pretty much as they had said, the British are at the head of this mess. Among other explosive findings, the files reveal high-ranking British military and intelligence figures drew up detailed plans to maximize attrition of Moscow's Black Sea fleet, plotted to blow up the Kerch Bridge connecting Crimea to mainland Russia with fertilizer bombs, and even devised blueprints for a series of submersibles which would allow Ukrainian divers to plant mines on Russian ships and infrastructure. Good grief. Further machinations include an explicit honey trap plan, which called for establishing a brothel secretly run by British intelligence in Crimea. There, Russian-speaking female Ukrainian agents would ply drunken sailors from the Russian Navy for information. The schemes were assembled by Project Alchemy, a secret British military planning cell whose existence was first exposed by the Grey Zone. Alchemy's intelligence aligned director Dominic Morris, once embedded with British Special Forces in Afghanistan while serving as a political officer for the UK Embassy. The first of the relevant files was sent on April 14th, 2022. The same day, Ukraine achieved its most spectacular naval success of the war when it sank Russia's flagship in the region, the Moskva. That feat was cheered by Western media, with the New York Times heralding the ship's destruction as a signal triumph, a display of Ukrainian skill and Russian ineptitude. As the previously unpublished files show, admirers of the operation also included Project Alchemy's Dominic Morris, who saw an opportunity to defeat the entire Russian Black Sea Fleet and immediately began crafting plans to sink the rest of Moscow's warships. Isn't that interesting? It started as early as a couple months after Russia had to go in and defend the areas of Russian-speaking areas that were being bombed and civilians killed there in Donbass, and the other two, I can't remember the names now, since 2014. And look, they were already plotting this. So it tells you this stuff has been going on for a long time to go and weaken Russia. And so let's see. Where am I? The destruction of the Moskva purportedly both surprised and panicked the Biden administration, as they apparently didn't believe Ukraine possessed missiles capable of striking such a target, and according to one mainstream report, hadn't intended to enable the Ukrainians to attack such a potent symbol of Russian power. But the attack apparently convinced the White House and Pentagon to double down on their military support for Kiev. And as the documents show, it had the same effect across the pond. In response to an April 23, 2022 brief authored by a fellow cell member on the importance of Western powers supporting Ukrainian land operations, Morris declared the sinking of Moskva meant Kiev should focus predominantly on maritime operations instead, after complaining that apart from a little bit of moving tanks and planes around a peaceful Europe, NATO was not doing any fighting. Morris wrote that he saw a chance for the UK to eliminate every Russian vessel in the region without even going to war. Well, that is an act of war. I guess they didn't think of that part, did they? You could defeat the entire Russian Black Sea Fleet with sub-threshold options, he wrote, referring to gray zone tactics, which the British military has officially defined as all activity up to, but not crossing, the legal definition of armed conflict. Morris specifically proposed commando raids as a FAB sub-threshold activity that will scare the SHIT out of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So, here's some messages from him on that. I truly wonder whether NATO is the center of gravity to test this. What has it done? Apart from a little bit of moving tanks and planes around a peaceful Europe, it has done nothing. It's not doing any fighting. Yeah, this is what we've already talked about. But, it's basically what they just discussed in this piece. The attack on the Moskva appeared to serve as a catalyst for Alchemy's Black Sea operations, which were already being assembled within a few hours of the news breaking. In a document dated the same day as the ship sank, Morris boasted that the current situation in Ukraine gives the West an ideal opportunity to degrade Russian military capability by destroying as much Russian equipment as possible, and went on to outline a series of multi-pronged and phased operations targeting Russia across the Black Sea. Inflicting a high casualty rate must continue because lots of dead soldiers returning to the mainland will have a big impact on public opinion in Russia, Alchemy's Morris declared. Well, that's just really sick, I must say. But that's people wanting more. Black Sea operations, and so they go into this whole thing. Project Alchemy also proposed a joint UK-Ukrainian intelligence operation in which female agents were surreptitiously inserted into Russian Navy admin posts. In Phase 1 of the operation, Morris proposed setting up a bar and brothel in Crimea to gain intelligence from drunken soldiers and serve as a honey trap for military and intelligence officers. The agents must be Russian speakers and attractive, able to manipulate, playing to the weakness of the average Russian male, he stressed. In the second phase, Morris proposed an unconventional option for blowing up Kerch Bridge, in which a hijacked Russian-flagged bulk carrier loaded with fertilizer, rigged with explosives, would be parked under the bridge and detonated. Morris assessed this will be a significant kinetic event that will be able to blast 4-6 pillars on the bridge, rendering it unusable for a long period of time. These sound like terror attacks, setups on how to do terrorism. I mean, what does that tell you about Britain? I guess nobody's surprised over this because they know Britain has been like this most people know Britain's been like this for, wow, a long time. Maybe a century or more. So, let's see. Given Kerch Bridge was Putin's crowning glory after taking Crimea, he suggested its total destruction had the potential to foment a palace coup in the Kremlin. The Kerch Bridge's collapse and the infiltration of spies into Crimea would lay foundations for the third phase, the main offensive of seizing the peninsula. Alchemy's previously established honeypot traps could establish covert safe houses and weapon stores in advance of the mission. Morris suggested next a direct attack against Sevastopol, using a tanker fully laden with fuel into Strelitz Bay. This would be in essence, a fire ship creating further panic and sending a strong signal to the Russian Navy that nowhere is safe in the region. They sound like terrorists. And they really are, because they're doing this covertly. So they're not, saying the Britain's not saying we declare war on Russia. They're just doing this surreptitiously. Finally, Morris advocated that Ukraine pursue a strategy of containment by seeking to disrupt and reflag the Black Sea fleet. The idea, the Alchemy chief explained, was to target the Black Sea fleet with the aim of destroying as many ships as possible, as Moscow's warships were trapped with little place to hide there. He urged the use of civilian vessels retrofitted with British-supplied weaponry and proposed ambushes using hijacked Russian ships to lure in a warship to be attacked by portable anti-ship missiles. Use civilian vessels. It reminds me of using civilian planes turned into, hacking through planes, instruments, so that you could fly them wherever they wanted as drones. Sounds familiar. While no such operation ever materialized, Sevastopol has been a consistent target of Kiev's drone and missile blitzes throughout the conflict. In fact, the Black Sea Operations memo identified the Nakhimov Naval Academy in the Crimean capital as an ideal target for such attacks. His institution has been repeatedly rocked by Ukrainian strikes during this period. And a incendiary strike on Kerch Bridge did come to pass in October 2022, and as the Gray Zone revealed at the time, it was almost certainly the outcome of blueprints prepared by Project Alchemy. And you'll notice they did that again. They did that again on June, the day after June 1st, I believe. This is a long article. So if you want to finish reading it, you just got to go to the Gray Zone and read that. That's the first thing I had to say, is this particular article, because it's important to know all of what was going on behind the scenes with the British. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Ukraine conflict settlement, future of the U.S.-Russia relations, NATO's lies, highlights from Putin's Q&A that he had the other day at the Eurasian Economic Union summit on Friday. Moscow will no longer play a one-sided game with the West, he said. He told the journalists on the sidelines of the Eurasian Economic Union summit in Minsk on Friday. During his press conference, Putin fielded questions on a wide range of issues, including the state of the economy, sanctions, and negotiations with Ukraine. Putin acknowledged that the roadmaps presented by the Russian and Ukrainian delegations at the second round of talks in Istanbul earlier this month were polar opposites. He said, however, that the talks were specifically held to look for ways to bring our positions closer. He welcomed the ongoing prisoner swaps and the return of the remains of fallen soldiers agreed at the talks. According to Putin, Russia is ready to hand over the remains of some 3,000 Ukrainian troops, in addition to the 6,000 it has already returned. The president said Moscow is ready to continue negotiations. We are ready to hold such a meeting in Istanbul, Putin said, or he stated, adding that the Russian and Ukrainian delegation leaders are in constant contact. He said he believes the next meeting should focus on discussing each side's memorandums. When Western nations speak about Russia's aggressiveness, they are turning everything upside down, Putin said, referring to NATO members' pledge to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. According to Putin, NATO had blatantly lied in the early 1990s when it promised not to expand eastward. He accused the alliance of constantly ignoring Russia's security concerns, particularly its warnings that NATO's expansion toward Russian borders would be viewed as a threat. That is what aggressive behavior looks like, he said, adding that Moscow is done playing one-sided games with the West. The president reiterated that Russia has no plans to attack NATO and intends to reduce defense spending over the next 3 years. NATO denies ever making commitments not to expand and insists it poses no threat to Russia. Really, you don't remember James Baker saying, "We won't move 1 inch east"? He had told Gorbachev that. And, U.S. is ahead of NATO at that time, and technically still is. Russia is currently spending 6.3% of its GDP on defense, which is a lot, Putin said. He acknowledged that the nation has paid for it with inflation, but it added that the government maintains a level-headed approach to the issue. The difference, he argued, is that Russia is supporting its own defense industry while NATO members in Europe are buying weapons from the U.S. Still, the Russian economy has grown more than 4% for 2 years in a row, while growth in the euro area has been just 0.9%. Putin claimed that France and Germany are on the brink of recession. They're about to drop dead, yet they're still trying to write our obituary. Boy, that sounds like a quote to remember. I like that. Putin reiterated that sweeping restrictions have failed to hinder Russia's growth. He expressed confidence that tougher sanctions on Russian oil exports currently being discussed in the EU and US will not change the situation. The world is consuming ever-increasing volumes of oil and petrochemicals as the global economy grows, he said, adding that a ban on Russian oil will be de facto impossible to enforce. Now, the last thing he has to comment on is President Trump. Putin said he has deep respect for U.S. President Donald Trump, describing him as a courageous man who has endured hardships, difficulties, and dangers. He added that Moscow welcomes the Trump administration's efforts to help resolve the Ukraine conflict. The president did not rule out a future meeting with Trump, saying Russia would welcome the return of American companies to its market. And I think that he's being a statesman there, Putin. He's being polite. And he also knows that Donald Trump is easily flattered. Okay? So I think that's part of why he's saying that. So anyway, interesting information on that. The last thing I wanted to say is this little piece here on the big drone and missile strike in the past 24 hours.
Start, and let's begin everything in details. And first, let's talk about the massive missile and drone strike that took place during the previous 12 hours. This morning, the Ukrainian sources published this picture where we can see the approximate routes of Russian attack. As you can see, the entire territory of Ukraine is covered with these lines, with yellow lines, with red lines, with blue lines and green lines, and with orange lines. Every single line means missile or drone that were heading towards another strategic position or temporary deployment point of Ukrainians. Lots of explosions took place during the previous nights, and the most interesting is that the biggest number of explosions were recorded in the western part of Ukraine. We're talking about the city of Lviv and the vicinity of the settlement. Furthermore, lots of explosions were recorded in the central part of Ukraine. We're talking about the oil refinery plant. We're talking about this area, Kremenchuk oil refinery, and that was not the first time when the Russians attacked this territory. Since the beginning of June, the Russians carry out at least 2 massive strikes exactly in this area, and as a result of previous attacks, lots of fuel depots, oil depots were destroyed by the Russians, and this is very important during Russian offensive operation in the Donbas direction. Furthermore, when talking about this map, we see that there were lots of explosions in the city of Nikolaev, in the city of Dnipro, and I would like to point your attention that for the first time, probably since the beginning of June, and since the beginning of any massive missile strike all over the entire territory to Ukraine. We haven't received anything from the city of Kiev. According to this map and according to sources, according to information we are receiving from the open sources, we haven't received anything regarding the situation in Kiev. So for the first time, the Russians decided to avoid Kiev and to move further in the western direction and in the southern directions and in the direction of the central Ukraine. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians used a significant number of drones and missiles. The Ukrainian sources reported that during the previous night, the Russians used around 537 drones and missiles altogether. So the biggest number ever since the beginning of the special military operation. The Ukrainians reported that they managed to destroy and to bring down 436 out of 477 drones, and the Ukrainians managed to bring down 39 missiles out of 60 Russian missiles. So as we can see, the results according to numbers are good, but when talking about real numbers, we see that even with these statistics, the Russians managed to damage and to destroy lots of facilities and objects of the Ukrainian armed forces. Especially very interesting that Ukrainians haven't managed to bring down even a single Kinzhal. So the Russians used 4 of them and Ukrainians haven't managed to bring any of them. And the Russians shown us very good statistics regarding the use of Iskander M missile. So just 1 missile out of 7 was destroyed by Ukrainians. And of course, during the previous nights, we were receiving lots of updates, lots of videos and pictures of how Russian missiles were flying above the territory of Ukraine over their targets. We could see lots of videos with explosions all over the entire territory of Ukraine, especially in the western part of Ukraine. I would like to remind you, it's the biggest attack since the beginning of the special military operation.
Okay. Lots of information he shared there. Hopefully you can understand. He has that broken English and quite interesting information from the Military Summary channel. And I want to add Alex Christophorou's little summary on what he says on it.
And good news for the people of Hungary. So let's move on and let's discuss the massive Russian missile and drone strike into Ukraine yesterday. Around 350, 400 drones into Ukraine, as well as 35 to 40 missiles launched into Ukraine. The Russian Ministry of Defense, they put out a statement saying that all the targets that they wanted to hit were hit. And they said they were targeting military facilities and facilities that produce weapons.
All men love the sound of a little.
Sorry about that. Okay,
That's because the bearskin
And military supply chains and stuff like that. They targeted. The interesting part about this strike, it was a massive strike, but the interesting part is that a lot of the focus on this missile and drone strike was in the west of Ukraine. Actually, a lot of focus in Kremenchuk, which is this city right on the Dnieper in the Dnipropetrovsk region, right on the Dnieper. From what I understand, Kremenchuk has many facilities which produce weapons for the Ukraine military, and they got hit really hard. And then the west of Ukraine, Lvov, and these areas very close to the border with Poland, also got hit very hard. Actually, the Polish military was put on high alert because of the proximity of these missile strikes. Another thing that happened yesterday was a bad day for Ukraine, bad day for Zelensky. Another thing that happened was that the air defense was nowhere to be seen. The Ukrainian air defense is completely crumbling. In many areas, it's non-existent. And F-16, they had to use F-16s in order to down many of the drones. The Ukraine military, and one of the F-16s, from what I understand, crashed or was hit by a drone or something like that, and the F-16 got destroyed. The pilot did not survive. And I think that is the fourth or fifth F-16 that Ukraine has publicly stated that has been destroyed.
Okay, well, you see how things are going with the Russia-Ukraine war. And as we know in the prophecies, that Russia will win, although we already think they have won, but prophecies have said Russia will win, will free the churches, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and it'll be fully freed and back to the Russian Orthodox Church connection. And yeah, I don't think the Ukrainian government's going to last after that. Once Russia marches through, I think they'll go to Kiev and do something about the government there. Anyway, I wanted to share some updates with you because one rarely hears anything much detail on what's going on between Russia and Ukraine at this time. So thanks so much for watching. Please share my channel. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also if you want to follow my Rumble channel, please like my videos if you like them, share my channel on YouTube with others, and get the word out. And then also you can make comments, of course, if you have any comments on any of these videos that I do. Thanks so much again for all your support. I hope you're having a great Sunday.